great to start with a bit of your story. And, you know, you've been running a coaching practice for over 9 years. And I just wondered kind of what that looks like day to day and what brought you to the point where you are doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, so exactly as you said, it's now been a little bit more than 9 years running my own coaching business. And I have a background in corporate environments. I worked for IKEA, the Swedish furniture company, and I did a lot of organizational development there. So I ran a lot of the different projects that we launched at IKEA. It was a lot of personnel, how do you say that? Personnel um, focus. Like we worked a lot with the staff, getting them on board. So we did a lot of change management and just staff development. And so after having done that for 9 years, I felt I wanted to do something else. I wasn't personally, I wasn't satisfied where what I was doing and what my life was looking like. So I had a little bit of an epiphany on. I often say I refer to it as the height of my career, because I was about to be groomed to become a country manager for IKEA, which means basically you become the CEO of that country for IKEA,
Right. Wow.
which is rather huge because IKEA has a large footprint in almost any country it goes into. Because you have a lot of times you have the stores, you have the storage or the warehouses. You also have suppliers, so that can come into that as well. So, and at the height of that, that's when I got the idea of maybe I want to do something else. And so I had that thought on a Monday, and by Wednesday I had handed in my resignation.
No way.
2 weeks later, and I completely blew up my career, and I had a bit of an identity crisis and depression for 5 long months as I was trying to figure out what's going to be next. And that's how I got into the coaching piece. I mean, obviously, IKEA used coaching as a primary strategy for staff development or leadership strategy. So coaching was very familiar to me. I had been trained internally to use coaching in different ways and levels, and so I just took stock. Okay, what do I enjoy doing? I love working with people. I love creating change. I love coaching. I just believe in coaching as a vehicle. So I was like, yeah, can you put that into like a job description? And I recognized, or I realized, oh, there is an actual thing as, calling yourself a coach. So I started that and got on to that journey, and and that's 9 years ago. So I have a very, again, one of the three things I enjoy is people. So I have a very human-centered approach. I like being around people. You and I, we've had a pre-conversation about empathy versus understanding. And we might get into that a bit. And so I am a very empathetic person, I believe. I use understanding to kind of connect and make sense of the world and people around me. And so coaching is such a wonderful profession, because my world expands on a constant basis. Like every week, it feels like my world just expands thanks to the people I get to meet and work with and the things we get to do together. Yeah. And just a side note, I guess. And before all of that, I was a trained dancer and actor. Not everybody knows that about me, so sometimes I throw that out there as a fun fact. So that was actually what I was doing until I was 22 years old, and I've been doing it since I was 6. So I've been on stages around Sweden touring since I was 6. And 12, I got a bit of a break and did a lot of interesting stuff around that time. And and that's it.
Wow. Yeah, that's a new one for me. I didn't know that. Yeah. That's. I'd love to get into a little bit more of how these different pieces in your background kind of smush together, and what they bring to what you're doing now as well. And maybe we'll kind of pick up on some of that stuff as we go. But one of the core things I reached out asking you, like, whether you'd be interested in having a conversation about, was the kind of ethicality in the coaching industry. It's something that I've been exploring quite a bit of recently, because there's a lot of baggage that comes with the word coach now. It's a weird thing where there's a lot of people hear the word coach. A lot of people know the word. They know that people are coaches, but they don't necessarily know what that means. And there's a lot of baggage that comes with it. Unregulated industry, all of that kind of stuff. And so I know this is something that like we've talked about in the past, like potential issues around certain elements of the self-development industry and that kind of thing. So I guess, just maybe speak into that, maybe speak into what a coach is as far as you're concerned, and anything that kind of comes out of that area.
Right. Yeah, exactly as you said. Because it's an unregulated industry, as of still, it's been almost up to the practitioners themselves to define it, and that is a brilliant opportunity, and it does come with some risks as well. And I think the consumer or the client has been picking up that burden a bit, and so I think right now, for me, I started picking up the message of ethicality in coaching. Well, obviously we'll get into that. We have some certifications. We have some organizations trying to define coaching, and this has been their concern for years, decades, really. So it's not new that way. However, when we saw a boom in coaching in the coaching industry, it quickly became clear that we also, on a larger scale, needed to consider the ethical aspects of coaching and business building as a coach. Well, so there's a couple of typical things that we talk about when it comes to coaching. There are some standards out there depending on which organization you kind of lean towards. ICF, International Coaching Federation, is one of them, one of the, I think, most known ones. They have certain definitions and criterias that kind of defines what a coach is or isn't, and is doing and not doing. I look at it from the perspective of, it's not therapy, which is the typical thing we often say. It's not therapy. And the typical thing we often then say is coaching is not so much focused on the past, but rather the future. That is a bit of a modification of the truth, I believe, because if you were a fly on the wall in any of my sessions, you will hear me ask about the past, right? So that absolutely happens. Sometimes we want to understand where we're coming from in order to know where we're going. However, I think there's a distinction in staying in the past, looking towards the past to find a solution or resolution, and because that takes other skills, I believe, which often therapists are trained in managing and using. So unless that's your background, a coach most often won't work in that time frame. I think they will rather bring people into the present moment, from there start creating the future they want. That's just my clumsy way of explaining that, I guess. I also think that coaching is a conversation-based practice. So we have conversations, and that allows us to go places where a lot of times clients, they don't go by themselves, or even in their deeper connections and relationships. And that's where I think the coaching profession has such a beautiful mission. It is that listening and that conversation, space holding, that just isn't being done anywhere else. And I often say, like, I honestly believe that what I do as a coach, a friend could do. And if it ever gets to that place where we all listen to each other on that level as a professional coach can do today, I don't mind if I'm out of a job, because that world I want to live in. Like, that's going to be a beautiful world when we're listening and communicating with each other on that kind of level. And until then, professional coaches are required, and I've got a job. So yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to talk about coaching. This is just a few, I think, things that I've attached to. I wouldn't mind just, on your own perspective on coaching. Is there anything you'd like to add to this, or just share as well?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, really. Like, it's very much kind of resonant with my approach to it and understanding of what I'm doing as a coach. And I think it's really that listening piece, and then the touching. You're right. Like, the past is a tool that you use to raise awareness of, like, I suppose, the obstacles, the patterns that might become present as you move towards the future. And so just, kind of using that as information, as data, as opposed to what might happen in therapy, which is to go in and try healing things in a deeper sense. And the questions around, like, when have you tried something like this before? And all of those kinds of things that will take you into the past and take you into maybe moments where actually I failed that in the past. And then, okay, what was it that meant that didn't work out as you'd hoped? And just using those sorts of questions to really help then support the way forward. And yeah, I mean, I've found it such a different, there's both a real natural, there's a natural element to the way that you coaching conversation will happen. But there's also something that is very unnatural in the way that, so for me, like, giving advice is, well, you tread carefully around that. Let's put it like that as a coach. So believing in the kind of resourcefulness of the person that you're coaching, they take responsibility for the path that they want to walk down. So it might be that you will say, oh, this is what happened when I did this, and this is what I chose to do. But it's never so this, therefore you should try doing it. And this is one of the points of, I think, antagonism when I'm thinking about this sort of ethicality of coaching, because I see it sold by a lot of people as, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to give you advice. I've been to the top of the mountain and now I'm going to tell you how to do the same. And like, in my training, that is not coaching. And it may well just be these definitions, and the different definitions, and it's kind of woolly, but I just feel like that isn't what people need, unless you've got a very specific thing. I guess, like, you're kind of past in IKEA, and you don't want to be coached on how to put together a flat pack wardrobe. You want a specific set of instructions because it's been designed in a particular way to work that way. And sometimes, you see people selling a coaching program like it's an instruction manual for a wardrobe, whereas actually it's a much more beautiful process than that, because you're coming into deepened awareness. The number of times that someone's come to coaching with me with a particular goal, they think this is the change that I want to make, and then after working together for a little while, it's like, actually, it's that was just a door that opened up the real stuff that was going to be explored, and, like, actually the thing that they want is totally different. And I just find that side of the process such a beautiful thing to be part of. But yeah, so any responses to anything I just said there?
I love that. That is a beautiful way of defining coaching, I think, and even explaining it, and getting into the challenges of that. A short way of saying that, and sometimes I use that expression of, my job as a coach isn't to answer your questions, it's to have you ask bigger questions.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
And it can sound ignorant or a bit defensive or weird at times. So it can be said with a bit of a, how do you say that? Like a wink almost. Because the point is, I think working with a coach, should be, I think should is the appropriate word here, should be less about them telling you what to do, and the both of you instead exploring what options you're open to.
Mm.
Um, and you put it so perfectly. So it's like it doesn't necessarily need a lot more explaining. I think it is on the ethical side of it. I think it is always an invitation to take heed and pay attention whenever someone's got is offering I think the English word is formulaic or
Yeah. Formulaic.
when they
Yeah.
formulaic, yeah, right, when it's a formula to success, right? Because that is, I think coaching is in its essence, and I think you and I seem to be agreeing on this. We believe in the individual's personal capacity, personal um, strength and ability, and so it will most likely be somewhat different to how you go about doing this very thing. Like leadership, working for IKEA, you mentioned that how all these different aspects come together. In some ways, I think at IKEA, even personally, my own personal leadership preference, but also with IKEA, actually based on their values, like there is a bit of a challenge where you know where you're going. You can't just control the way you get there. And I think anytime you delegate, anytime you lead people, there's always going to be that balance of, okay, this is where we're going, and I can't micromanage you to go exactly the way that I want you to go. So it's more about how do I get the group to move in unison towards that thing without me needing to absolutely control every aspect of that.
Mm.
And coaching has that as well, I think, because we're talking to individuals. So uh, that anytime there's a message that seems to have this formula to it, I think we should pause and just go,
Mm.
what guarantees do I have that this is going to be the right approach for me?
Yeah.
And most likely there aren't going to be many guarantees like that, especially if they're lacking in the ethical department on that.
Mm.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's really true, and it's like just something that I'd always recommend people do is just really when you sort of encounter a program that has that formulaic and it's being sold as a recipe for success or that kind of language around it, like ask as many questions as possible of the person delivering it, and does it have the one-on-one component to it? Because often, you know, there's a lot of corner cutting that goes on. Maybe it's delivering a course dressed up as coaching. It's like, if there's not a conversation, you know, you mentioned the importance of the conversation. If that's not happening, then coaching can't happen in that respect, because it's all about getting to know the person and getting to know, okay, like opening up, you know, the option. Did you say the options that they're willing to explore? That, whatever that phrase was that you said, I really like that. Yeah, kind of exploring the options that they are both willing to, and the things that haven't occurred to them before. Like, I love that creative aspect of coaching where you're really opening up well, what could you do? Like, what would such and such a person do in this, if they were in your shoes at the moment? Like that phase when you're not restricting to, this is what you're definitely going to do, but like that creative brainstorming stuff. Like, I love that part of the process as well. But that can't really happen if you're not having a conversation. And yeah, so it's a fascinating aspect of it. I'd love, is there a difference between, so when you're sort of using coaching in the corporate setting, obviously within or beneath the umbrella of IKEA's goals, is there a difference when you're coaching people within a corporate umbrella to when you're coaching people as you do now?
I think the quickest difference to point out is usually there are different stakeholders,
Yeah.
right? So anytime you get involved in corporate coaching, a lot of times the the owner of that assignment, the stakeholder might be, a CEO, a C-suite manager, or something along those lines, and then the receiver of my services is someone completely different from that. Right. So that is always, I find that to be somewhat tricky. And I think, again, going into ethics of coaching is something to be aware of, because who are you being loyal to, and confidentiality, and who are you actually holding space for? And none of that needs to be too big of a challenge, as long as there's, as you mentioned, a conversation. So rather than having expectations or having a lot of unsaid hopes, create agreements. So have those almost courageous conversations up front with the stakeholder and say, hey, how do we approach this? How do we do that? And I believe I have colleagues in the industry who shy away from that. And because of that, they cause a lot of issues for themselves when there's a situation presenting itself where loyalty is being kind of questioned. And so, if we would have dared to have that conversation before, then maybe we all could have benefited better in that relationship. So I think that is one of the trickier things. Like, even as a mid-level manager, whatever, if you're using coaching with your team, you still have a manager, you still have someone you're answering to. And so if you ask someone, where would you like to go? I'd like to do that. Right. How long are you expecting that to take? Well, 12 years. Yeah, great. But we have a thing happening in 3 months. It's kind of like there's still that agenda, right? So that is a bit of a tricky thing. And if you practice this, what you're unlocking, though, is just marvelous. I really believe, because again, I think coaching is such a life-giving experience, because it almost comes down to this old adage, or whatever, it's how you say that. It, like, you say, if you give a starving person a fish, they'll be full for a day. If you teach a starving person to fish, they never go hungry again. And coaching is very much that, I believe. It is the belief that if we allow you to see how to resolve this yourself, there won't be situations like this. Like, you won't need support that way. You won't need instructions every single time to manage this. And so, even at work, even in a corporate setting, I think having that mindset, it looks like it might take a bit longer. It looks like it might cost a bit, but I think in general, done well over time, it balances itself out, and actually potentially even better. So I did that. Like, that was one of the things I did for IKEA that put me on the map. Is at that time I was working as a foreman, so it was quite operationally oriented. And at that time, in that context, we had a lot of tracking and follow up, and we gave feedback instantly to people working or not working. And I just had a sense that we were overdoing that. We were overdoing on our instructional, micromanaging leadership approach. So I kind of tapped into my innate understanding of human behavior and motivation. And I came up with this idea, this radical idea of, what if we enjoyed what we did? Would that have a positive effect on productivity? And so, and I absolutely believed it would. I absolutely believed that would be the case. So I managed to get a sponsor. I managed to get one of the higher ups to give me some space to test out a project where I wouldn't focus on all of these metrics that way. We would instead look for ways to make people feel seen, heard, appreciated, involved, increasing engagement, etc., etc. And this was 2006, I believe. And so I was doing that, and I had no one else liking what I was doing. They were kind of like, no, A, it's not going to work. B, don't be so, like, don't be such a, stuck up, or whatever it was. They just judged it. It turned out to be exactly as I envisioned. I told my sponsor, here's what's going to happen. We're going to see a dip in productivity because this is a new way of doing it. People are going to need to find their ways. I knew I was going to use coaching as a way to do this. So it took a bit more time up front. And so after that dip, we're going to see a rise, and it's going to continue, and it's going to get to a level where it was higher after than before. And that's what he bought into. My sponsor is like, okay, great. If that's what you believe, that's what I'm putting my money on. Exactly that happened. Everything, and not only that, from my department, there were so many people coming out of that and becoming managers and leaders themselves. So besides productivity, we saw people becoming self-reliant, self-leaders, etc., which then put them on the map for leadership development programs, and they went on to become higher ups as well. So I think that's, again, the potential in human beings. When it's unleashed that way, when it's not caged in, then the whole company benefits. So it wasn't just productivity, it was development, retention, etc. And yeah, so again, that I connect that in so many ways with corporate coaching and individual coaching. Like it doesn't have to be that different.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great story of how, I guess, the confidence is instilled in people through just being able to be human and being able to, actually, I guess it's that empowerment word, isn't it? Of like finding that sense of who I am and how I operate, and I'm being given the space and the trust to be able to do that. And the offshoot of that, it just doesn't surprise me at all that then you see people going into leadership positions out of that kind of team. And because there's a sort of self-belief that's been instilled through having the confidence of those people above you and around you who just are not trying to, as you say, cage you in or stifle your development or tell you exactly what to do and stuff. And that really is at the heart of coaching, again, as we said earlier, that you are resourceful. Let's find your resources. Let's find where you can be confident in those things around you that's already there. So the ethicality around coaching, I think there's two pieces really, as you mentioned it. There's like the practice itself, the coaching, what you do as a coach in your practice, and then business building as a coach was the other thing you mentioned. And I'd love to kind of go down that road a little bit. We first met each other through an event that me and Sarah Santacroce put on about a year or so ago, I think. And we were talking about humane marketing and gentle marketing, the kind of alternative ways of marketing to some of the mainstream assumptions around sort of scarcity tactics and all of that sort of stuff. And again, kind of seeing coaching, the business building side of coaching, and the marketing aspects of coaching. Now, you said you're not a marketer. I think all of your business is kind of built on word of mouth referrals. So there's a really lovely alternative way of doing things to maybe some of the go-to ways that we might be told, oh, if you're going to be a coach, you've got to do it this way. So I guess, how did you come across Sarah to start with? And what does humane marketing mean to you?
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny how that happens, right? We connected in such a lovely way, and all thanks to that event, and then Sarah kind of making an introduction as well. And I'm very grateful for that. So Sarah Santacroce, who's started originally the gentle marketing revolution, transformed into the humane marketing revolution. At the time, I was organizing a summit I called an online summit. I was interviewing 12 experts, and I was focusing on authentic business building. So I wanted to help people listening to some of the inspirations that I've had, like I've hired out my own coaches and my own mentors to help me develop a word of mouth based business building approach, right? Because I knew that almost 9 years ago, I kind of like, I don't want to do marketing. Like, I don't want that. There's got to be another way. And I kind of sought out to find that. Luckily, I read books, I contacted people, I hired people. And so a couple of years ago during lockdown and everything, I felt like I wanted to share some of those resources. So I basically reached out to the people that were already part of my ecosystem, my network, and I said, would you mind coming on and being interviewed by me and you sharing some of your best ideas on this? And so Sarah was a new person. I had only come across her because I think I was at that time I was researching alternative ways of marketing, and her book came up. So I read her book and I loved her book. And at that time, before she changed the branding, it was called the Gentle Marketing Revolution, I think. And I loved it. I reached out to her and asked if she wanted to come on and speak to this, and she agreed to do that. She's, as a humane marketer herself and a gentle marketer herself, she is picky with how where she goes to present, and rightfully so, because she doesn't want to be part of a machinery that is very much scarcity driven or urgency driven, or the expression Sarah sometimes used, bro marketing, this typical attitude. So she often does a bit of vetting. So she wanted to be on my newsletter list and see what I was sending out. She wanted to listen to some of my clients' testimonials, stuff like this. So just to get an understanding of, do I want to lend my expertise to Adam and his summit? And I really honored her for that. I was so impressed with that. And so that started a really, really beautiful relationship with her. She came on my summit. It was absolutely a treat to have her there. Then I got involved in her circle, where she brings humane marketers and movers and shakers of the world into that mastermind area. And I did that for years and became a certified humane marketer and business coach under Sarah's program. To kind of keep spreading the word. I totally believe in the work she's doing around that. And and so when she showed up on your podcast and your program, it was a live thing. I was like, I love live stuff because it's way more intimate. So I was like, I'm going to watch that. And then I resonated with you on so many levels, and that kind of opened up this thing. And to kind of talk about the humane marketing, I think is, as I mentioned, scarcity, urgency, bro marketing, a lot of these potentially unethical ways of marketing. That's what Sarah has taught me to keep an eye out for. And as you mentioned, I make a distinction in being a marketer and being a coach, because I think I look at it like, where am I spending most of my time? If what you're doing the time is being a marketer, which could look differently to different people, but if you're making a lot of posts on Instagram, if you're creating reels, if you're creating this and this and that, and if you're doing Facebook ads, all of that, like if most of your time is going towards marketing activities, then you're more of a marketer than you are a coach. Now, obviously, you're trying to get to a point where you get to work with more clients, so it's a means to an end. Where I focus is, I want to be really good at what I'm doing, because I believe that Steve Martin, the American comedian, he once said, to the question asked, how did you get so good? Like, how did you become such a success? And he said, well, I got so good they couldn't ignore me. Right. And I actually think that is a valid strategy. Like, you can literally be so good that people won't ignore you. And in my book, it means that I can actually control that. Like, I can work on that. I can I can master my craft. Another quote I often refer to when I'm talking about this is from Seth Godin, another American marketing guru, where he says marketing is the tax you pay for not being remarkable. And that is no criticism. That's not to say that you're being bland or generic. That's not what it is. It's simply, if people are not talking about you, then yes, you probably will pay to be talked about so that people can discover you. However, if you can manage to find some remarkability, create something that's being remarked on, then marketing is what you probably don't have to do as much. And so I decided I want to be remarkable. I want to be so good people can't ignore it. And because I focused on that, I didn't have to spend so much time learning social media, algorithms, and Canva templates, and all kinds of stuff. And then, having learned from Sarah, I also understood that even like the copy on our websites and the different functions we might add also contribute to that marketing or gentle marketing approach. And so I started practicing some of that, which also then started leading me into ethical coaching. And that's really just the origin story of all of that, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. So there's so much in what Sarah does that just is like, yes, we need this so much. And it's great to hear that story, and the setting the intention for you of like, actually, no, I don't want to go down that road, because it is so easy to get caught in the marketing web where you don't have any time left to actually hone the craft of the coaching and to become the remarkable coach and to do the thing that it is that you're marketing towards in theory, which is why I think there becomes so much of a culture of smoke and mirrors, where it's people just trying to lure in to a program or to a whatever the product is that you're selling, and the product ends up not being all that good because you don't have time to actually make the thing good, and you're always focused on growth and converting people to buy, as opposed to welcoming people into the thing where the magic happens. And I always I think Sarah, I remember hearing her say once about the energy with which people arrive at the door or through the door into your sort of business home, so to speak. And if you're marketing with urgency and scarcity tactics, when people arrive there, you've primed them with that in their nervous system. And then when you start going through the coaching, you're building a coaching partnership, which one of the beautiful things about that is it allows you to slow down and hold the space for real exploration and awareness building and all of that kind of thing, that may, a bit like that sort of charting that you talked about with the IKEA situation, it may feel like, oh no, we're going backwards, or I'm not getting anywhere at the beginning. But that's because you're needing to reshape things and reposition things so that then you ultimately get on that upward curve and it feels good and it keeps going a lot further than where you've started. But if you come with that energy of urgency and scarcity, you're expecting instant results, and you might not even last beyond a single session because it's like nothing, you haven't changed my situation. And so it ultimately backfires a lot of the time when you're sort of focused on the converting, and from that perspective, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely. I think that a lot of times, and let me just say that, like from my own perspective, I judge my own business health based on renewals and referrals. Right, I mean, that's just my metrics. In business school, they will teach you that it's cheaper to retain clients or renew clients than it is to acquire new clients. So I think we all agree to that, and yet, what the marketing coach, the coach who markets a lot, is relying a lot on new business all the time, and I think, again, I don't think that is there's not an issue with marketing. It's just, if you're always having to rely on new people coming in, then what about the people you're working with? Like, could you slow things down? Could you spend more time on that? I do talk a little bit about, there's a bit of a process to word of mouth marketing. And the way that I look at that is, for that to happen, we need time. We need time to go deep. We need to make things we do remarkable.
Yeah.
Most of the time, though, we're stressed because we're trying to both deliver our services and grow the business using marketing tactics. Like, there are schools, people go to training to learn marketing, and yet here we are doing this on our free time and trying to, have a family and all of these things. So often, whatever we do put out as a marketing asset, like that can be a post or an ad or whatever it might be, even a podcast, because we did it so haphazardly or we did it so quickly, it's not going to go deep enough to be remarkable. So yeah, it's just noise, it's just volume, it's just adding to everything else out there. And then I would argue, don't expect it to actually make a splash. And so that's why I'm like, even when people say, well, you should post once every week or 3 times every week or whatever, well, maybe not. Maybe one is enough, but that one is powerful. It goes deep. And with depth, I don't only mean helpfulness, like, or relevance. I'm talking about, for example, because we're talking about ethics as well. When you're putting something out, can you spend some time slowing everything down and go, how am I making sure that this is inclusive? How can I make this relevant to more people than my initial thoughts? Right. I have my clients in my mind when I'm producing a podcast, right? And so and they're a typical group of people a lot of times. How can I make this relevant for more people?
Mm.
People outside of my typical scope of clients. But a lot of times we don't have time for that. And so again, I think with ethicality, when we take time, we can start entertaining those things. Because if we're rushed, if we're just desperate and kind of goal oriented that way, we are going to take shortcuts and we're going to miss out on all the other things that I think we should also be concerned with.
Mm.
Um, there's a woman called Michelle Warner who she's a friend of Sarah's as well. They've done a couple of things together. I think Michelle might have been on Sarah's podcast at one point. So she teaches I don't know what her program's called, but she basically teaches to use marketing differently as well. So this is a way she says it, but I don't think it's actually what she calls it. But this is what I picked up from her. So she makes a distinction between traffic marketing and relationship marketing. And I think that is the best definition of Michelle's work, because I think you could theoretically do gentle marketing or humane marketing, still subscribing to traffic marketing perspectives, meaning you're driving volumes to that marketing funnel or sales path. Whereas Michelle is talking about using relationships. And that's very much what I'm about as well. I think there are ways to look for ways to be helpful, and in that helpfulness, nurturing, building relationships, which tend to evolve into different things. And so that's another, I think, helpful term to keep in mind: traffic marketing versus relationship marketing. With relationship marketing, there's just the connection, it's the humaneness, and Sarah's very much about that as well. And there are, like, even what you and I are doing, like, this is us kind of relationship marketing. And if we're running a community, getting people to come in and share their expertise is kind of relationship marketing as well, in many ways. And if like with most of our relationships, if we don't maintain those relationships, then they will probably not be as relevant as they could be. So that is where I spend my time, a while back in this conversation, you asked, what does it look like? Like, what's a day like in your coaching almost? And to me, it's really, I'll be on 2 coaching calls a day. Typically, they last for about 90 minutes each. And there might be some summaries going on afterwards where I do some stuff with my notes or whatever. And besides that, the rest of the day is maybe creating something, an asset or resource in connection to the work I'm doing with someone. And the rest of the time is spent in relationships with people. My preferred way of doing that is email and or WhatsApp. I just like those mediums. And I connect, I follow up, I check in, and not just a regular check-in. Hi, how are you? Question mark. Like that isn't relevant enough for someone to break their busy day schedule and reach back out to me most of the time, unless it's my mother. She will, right? But she's not my client, so it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So what I do is I spend time thinking about the people that are in my atmosphere, and I go, we had that conversation about that thing. Oh, I came across Andy's podcast the other day and he spoke to this thing. I think that's a brilliant thing. So I might reach out to my friend, my client or prospect and say, hey, the other day I listened to a brilliant podcast episode with Andy. It was something that really reminded me of what we were talking about. Would you like me to share it with you? And this is a key thing. I ask for permission first. I don't just dump it. Right.
Yeah.
So I ask, would you like me to share it? Plus, because again, with the coaching approach, them saying yes actually lowers their defenses, creates a little bit of a commitment around that. So that allows them, and also it allows them to feel like that is a conversation, not a dialogue or a monologue where I'm just dumping whatever I want on them. And I think business-wise, it allows me to then 2 or 3 days later check back in and say, hey, did you listen to the podcast? What did you like? What was your biggest takeaway? And they go, oh, sorry, I didn't have time. Oh, crap. And then I can go back in and say, yeah, no worries. I particularly liked this section. This is where I thought about you. If you don't have the time, just fast forward to that section, give it a listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 3 days later, I have another reason to check back in. And that is, I think, how we can maintain some business relationships, nurturing them, rather than needing to market. I don't know if that is helpful enough, but it's a little bit.
I think that's such a
approach.
I just feel almost a sense of freedom just hearing you talk about that, because it lightens the load, it lightens the demands, and that idea of like seeking agreement at every stage as well. You know, when you email and say, would you like me to share that? You know, I came across this thing. This, you know, like even just that, the idea that, I was on Adam's mind and he saw something and it sort of reminded him of something we talked about. But then, seeking that agreement rather than, because if you just share the link straight away, I'm going to be thinking, oh, he's telling me to listen to that, as opposed to inviting me to listen to something that he thinks I might like. And there's a subtle yet huge difference between those two things. I love that. It's really, really powerful. And that sort of sense, I really like that relationship versus traffic marketing. And the relationship building is, you're not thinking about marketing, whereas traffic marketing, you're thinking about it's a strategy, it's a tactical approach. Whereas if you just create the conditions for the relationship building and the relationship nurturing, you're not thinking I'm marketing right now. You're thinking, oh, just reach out to such and such a person and tell them about this thing. And and that again is, so many people, I think, feel the burden of the need to market. And actually, if you can find a way that feels like, to me, just hearing you talk about that, it's like, I know that feels good. That feels like the sort of approach that wouldn't be draining. It wouldn't be exhausting. Whereas the idea of promotion and marketing can just feel like, oh, it's such a burden. It's just a heavy weight on my mind. It's this thing I have to do. And actually, no, it's a thing you get to choose how you do, and you can do it in a way that feels good. That's really cool. And I'd love to just talk a little bit about your podcast before we wrap up, because that's obviously, I think podcasting has become something I've done for, I think, about 14 years I've been podcasting. So it's been quite fun to see the different iterations of it over the years and how it's gathered momentum in different ways, and you see sort of different trends and things emerging. But yeah, one of the things I've seen is podcasts being promoted as a great marketing tool. And one of the things I love about your podcast is it doesn't feel like that at all. And that's one of the reasons that I enjoy listening to it. For a start, you don't have advertising on it. So that's always a relief. There's something about podcasts that have and I understand, you have a business model, you sort of decide that's how we're going to make our money, whatever. But I feel that podcasting, the original vision, the original thing of why a podcast is so valuable is because it is different from mainstream media. It's different from those models that require adverts to be constantly interjecting into the flow of the content and the resources that you're enjoying. So yeah, I'd love to know sort of, what the podcast is to you inside the comfort zone, what it gives you, and how does it fit with that relationship with the marketing piece as well?
I love that you picked up on that. That is such a nice jumping off point, because exactly as you said, to me, typically, if you're a coach, if you're a thought leader, whatever, having a podcast is brilliant, of course, because you can kind of position yourself and use it very much as a marketing tool. I probably, in some part, that is what it is. Only the thing about my podcast, it's called Inside the Comfort Zone. So to me, first of all, it launched because I wanted to, how do you say that? I needed to put a stake in the ground around Inside the Comfort Zone concept, which is now a book I'm drafting and writing on. And so that is a bit of a different approach. And I felt, first of all, I needed to claim the spot, the space for it. And also, to me, Inside the Comfort Zone is a nuanced message. Again, it's not a formulaic thing. It's like, oh, all you have to do is this, and then no, that's not what it is. It requires a conversation, and so the podcast became that conversation. And I had a very specific kind of vision for it, because I was thinking about the people that are relevant to me, and so typically it's the people I come across, it's the people I maybe work with, and they are busy people. They are not the ones who can spend 3 hours listening to a Joe Rogan podcast. They have busy lives, and so I knew I wanted to make them short. And in order to make them short, because I can talk a lot, that's always been my gift and curse, I think. So I knew I couldn't rely on my own kind of tact. Like I wouldn't be able to just unscripted go on, because I've done that and I can speak for hours. Mm-hmm. So I knew I needed to script it. So I started writing it, which was in itself a lovely process to write the episodes, because it afforded me some time to research and pull up more relevant information, which gave more richness to the episode. So if I'm talking about emotions, for example, then I always lead with my take on it. And then I want to bring in other influences as well. And that can be something I've managed to find on someone else's podcast or a book or an article. And I always try to pay tribute to wherever my inspiration might come from. And I also added some background music just to enhance the experience, because again, I wanted people to go through that with the shortness of a straight to the point message, but also entertaining. Like it should be something they looked forward to engaging with. And so I add some background music and to enhance and kind of amplify the message. And really what it comes down to me, we talked about that 5 minutes ago. The podcast allowed me to always have something fresh to send people. Right. Obviously, I consume podcasts, I read articles, and I read books. So there's always that as well, which I can send as a resource to someone I'm thinking about. And even better, I guess, is when someone hears my voice and they understand my perspective, my take on it, because it allows them to nurture that relationship even more. Yeah. Because again, to me, it comes down to a relationship. So them hearing me, them understanding me is that way. Because in coaching, and I think this is kind of where the podcast came into be as well, I don't give a lot of advice. I don't talk a lot. So the people I work with, we can work for years together, and they still don't know what might be my take on mistakes and failures, right? Yeah, I will guide them and I will support them. And at the end of the day, they've never heard me speak for 15 minutes on failures. And so that became an expression for me to do that. And I think it's actually deepened my relationship to my clients because of that, because they've gotten to hear my voice and my take on it. So I use it as a piece, as a talking piece. I might say to someone, hey, I just recorded this thing and it made me think about our last conversation or the thing we talked about 6 months ago, whatever. Would you like to have a listen? And if they say yes, I'll share it with them. And that's really what the podcast is. So my reach is really small because it's mainly my clients. Like, I don't promote it per se. It's a word of mouth thing. And so when it started, I used to have like 13 listeners. I could see that on Spotify. I was like, yeah, I know the names of all 13 people. I actually thought that was a cool thing. Like, I know who these are. Yeah. Now it's grown a bit, so I don't know the names, I'm sure. But I do enjoy the idea of the people listening to it. Like, I've met them or we know each other in some ways. And I like that. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And there's something, it'd be great to have another conversation in the future, kind of diving into some of the elements of that and the stuff around inside the comfort zone as well, like the messaging that you kind of bring to that. But just on what you've said, there's something beautifully rebellious about enjoying the small numbers and enjoying the intimacy of that. And it's something that I've always, I've never really chased big numbers on the podcast, but it's the depth. Again, you sort of talked about that depth aspect earlier, and bringing people along for the ride as well. So there will be times where maybe a conversation I've had with somebody has sparked an idea and sparked a little rabbit hole kind of journey for me. And then I'll be like, what we talked about, I've just done a podcast sort of expanding on thoughts around that. And I script most of, like, my solo episodes, I script partly to contain them a little bit. But mostly because I think I find the writing process, and as you say, the research that comes with that, like, is a really enriching thing to get to do and to really explore the thinking around things and my own thinking and then the thinking that exists outside of me. And it's just a great thing. And yeah, oh man, you've inspired me here. There's so much that I want to take with me. But yeah, I guess to finish, I had a question, just like, what is something that you would love people to think and talk about more?
Yeah, maybe. Well, if I can, I'll be quick about it. I'll say two things then, right? So I want to stay on topic, and I'll say if anyone's listening and they're practicing as a coach or a healer, a mentor, a helper in any way, I think I'd like to invite you to look up the ethics a bit more. Just go through that. There's a resource, you can probably link to it. There's a website called ethicsforcoaching.org, I believe. They're doing a lot of great work right now, developing standards and pillars for ethical coaching. They've got 4 pillars for ethical coaching, which are really easy to kind of grasp. And there's a free PDF that you can download on their page. I recommend it strongly. It outlines basically the whole mission and the reason behind the ethicality of it. So that's an invitation to say, I wish more people like you and me looking to do good in the world, we just make sure, because we've been trained a certain way. We have biases that will benefit from just kind of reviewing and taking stock of what we put on our website, what we do in our messaging, how we sell, and our policies, etc. So that's one thing. And I think the second thing is, which might be just a cliffhanger, but it is that inside the comfort zone. It is to invite people to see what it feels like to be and operate from inside their comfort zones. So I happen to believe that change and performance and even success is all possible from inside the comfort zone. We talked about relationship marketing and connecting with people. One of the things I often do is I ask people to, if they're relationship marketing as a way of doing things, I like them to stay inside their comfort zone when it comes to connecting with people. And most people understand this, and I'm just making a point here. Because when you're uncomfortable, I dare to say, you'll struggle with connecting, and you'll come across nervous. You'll come across, you'll go blank. You're not going to be authentic. You're not going to be yourself. We all know what it feels like to be comfortable and relaxed with other people, and so that's when we're comfortable. So I'm so much in your business, building a business, running a business is uncomfortable. Why would you make connecting with people uncomfortable as well? So that's where I'm saying, like, if you do one thing to be comfortable, connect inside your comfort zone and see where that, like, how your relaxed self, your comfortable self, your confident self comes out to play, and how much faster you'll be able to nurture and build those relationships. Yeah.
Great.
I guess
that's a beautiful cliffhanger for the second part of this conversation, which is going to happen. There's so much to get into there. That's amazing. Adam, thank you so much for your time here. This has been just really full of gold nuggets, and I'm looking forward to going and editing it and reliving. It's so often I'll miss things first time around in the conversation itself, and then I go back, edit through, and I'm like, that's something else that was great. So where do you want to point people to to connect with you?
Well, the best place is just to go to my website, adamkawalec.com. From there you can find my podcast. There is even a way to connect with me directly, WhatsApp, etc., which is mainly the best way to do it. I'm not on social media per se, so you don't go looking for me. You probably won't find me properly. So just go there.
Fantastic. Yeah, there are some other Adam Kawalecs, but they're not you.
Yeah. No, they're not. True.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, thank you. So a huge thanks to Adam Kawalec for taking the time to have that conversation. It was so great, such a joy to speak with him. Do go and check out his podcast, Inside the Comfort Zone. And also let me know what you're taking away from this conversation. Drop me a message through my website, andymort.com, or you get in touch with me via social media. I'm on quite a few platforms, unlike Adam. But I really loved the simplicity of when he was talking about that sort of marketing through meaningful connection, type thing, just having conversations. That is really something that I'm thinking a huge amount about at the moment. Finding ways to build a business that don't suck the energy and the life out of you. There are often things we kind of get drawn to thinking that we need to be out of our comfort zone for, aren't there? I was speaking for myself anyway. And we can overlook ease. We can overlook the things that actually would give us the path of least resistance to the kind of destination of maximum effectiveness. Yeah, the things we're good at, the things we enjoy doing, and the things that are also effective. I don't know about you, but I've definitely had to work through an internalized story that says, well, if you're finding it fun, then it's not work, is it? But what I've learned is the more that I let myself have fun, the more people are kind of attracted to that sort of energy, to that spirit. It's almost like people aren't attracted to working with somebody who's, constantly suffering and overwhelmed and is like busy to the point of distraction. And they're more likely to see somebody operating inside their comfort zone and think, well, yeah, like I want some of that for myself. That is the life that I desire, I guess. Also, yeah, Adam is currently offering free personal 75-minute workshop and Q&A sessions with him, so like one-to-one, I believe, that will help you grow your business without marketing or social media. So if you go to his website, adamkawalec.com, there's a way to find out more about that and to sign up for a session. It's Adam Kawalec, KAWALEC.com. And as always, if you have any challenges or goals that you're sort of hitting a bit of a block with and you need to get unblocked on, you can always book a Pick the Lock call with me, where we'll just get into it together. Even if you've been banging your head against a wall with it for a while, it just helps to get some fresh questions from someone outside of the immediacy of that situation. And yes, that sort of coaching expertise I bring to that as well is there for you. Yeah. All right. I think that will do us. Another huge thanks to Adam for taking the time to chat with us. And thanks to you for joining me and listening. And yeah, I'll be back again soon with another episode of the Gentle Rebel podcast. Until then, do remember that you are an artist. The world needs your art. Now go and make somebody's day. Bye-bye.